I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened in the Almeida watershed. I wasn't a stranger to those woods. I grew up 40 minutes from the trailhead. I knew the drainage patterns, the ridge names, the places where cell signal dies and where it briefly, inexplicably returns. This wasn't a story about a naive person walking into something they didn't understand. I understood that forest better than I understood most people. That's exactly why it chose me. My name is Darren Voss, and in October of last year I organized a 5-day backcountry trip into the Almeida for 6 people. The occasion, if you can call it that, was a farewell. My friend Joel Marsh had been diagnosed with an inoperable glioblastoma the previous spring. He was 31 years old and had been given, with treatment, perhaps 14 months. He'd chosen not to pursue treatment. That gave him less. Not a somber one, he said. He wanted to get deep into country that didn't care about him, cook over a fire, drink whiskey he couldn't afford, and sleep on the ground one more time. He wanted to feel like an animal before he stopped being one. I said yes immediately. I started planning the route the same night. The group was 6. Me, Joel, his younger sister Margot, our mutual friend Corinne Park, Corinne's partner Andre Liston, and a guy named Tatum Bell who Joel knew from his climbing days and who I'd met exactly twice. I wasn't thrilled about Tatum. He had the energy of someone who'd read a lot of survival blogs and confused that with competence. But Joel wanted him there. And this was Joel's trip. So I kept my mouth shut. I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened in the Almeida watershed. I wasn't a stranger to those woods. I grew up 40 minutes from the trailhead. I knew the drainage patterns, the ridge names, the places where cell signal dies and where it briefly, inexplicably returns. This wasn't a story about a naive person walking into something they didn't understand. I understood that forest better than I understood most people. That's exactly why it chose me. My name is Darren Voss, and in October of last year I organized a 5-day backcountry trip into the Almeida for 6 people. The occasion, if you can call it that, was a farewell. My friend Joel Marsh had been diagnosed with an inoperable glioblastoma the previous spring. He was 31 years old and had been given, with treatment, perhaps 14 months. He'd chosen not to pursue treatment. That gave him less. Not a somber one, he said. He wanted to get deep into country that didn't care about him, cook over a fire, drink whiskey he couldn't afford, and sleep on the ground one more time. He wanted to feel like an animal before he stopped being one. I said yes immediately. I started planning the route the same night. The group was 6. Me, Joel, his younger sister Margot, our mutual friend Corinne Park, Corinne's partner Andre Liston, and a guy named Tatum Bell who Joel knew from his climbing days and who I'd met exactly twice. I wasn't thrilled about Tatum. He had the energy of someone who'd read a lot of survival blogs and confused that with competence. But Joel wanted him there. And this was Joel's trip. So I kept my mouth shut. I chose a route I'd done pieces of before but never connected end to end. A 15-mile approach up the North Fork drainage to a high basin I'd camped in as a teenager. Then a ridge traverse to a second basin on the east side, then a steep descent back to the trailhead through a canyon called the Letts Creek Corridor. 5 days, 4 nights, moderate elevation. Nothing technical. The only unusual feature was that the middle section, the ridge traverse between the 2 basins, crossed about 3 miles of forest that wasn't on any official trail, not closed, not restricted, just unmaintained. The trees were old-growth Douglas firs so thick that the canopy blocked GPS intermittently. I'd been through it once before, years earlier, and remembered it as beautiful and disorienting in equal measure. I told everyone to stay within voice range on that section. We started on a Tuesday. The weather was perfect. Mid-40s. Dry, no wind. The kind of fall day that makes the Pacific Northwest feel like a secret the rest of the country doesn't deserve. Joel was in better shape than I expected. He'd been running in the weeks before the trip, he said, trying to make his body remember what effort felt like. He set a pace on the approach trail that had Andre breathing hard by mile 3. The first day was good. I mean that without reservation. We made camp at 7 miles in, beside a creek crossing I'd marked on the topo map. Corrine caught 2 small brook trout. Andre built a fire that was, I'll admit, structurally better than anything I'd have managed. Margot and Joel sat on a log and passed a flask and talked in low voices while the rest of us pretended not to listen. Tatum set up his tent with military precision and then gave an unsolicited 15-minute lecture about bear canister placement. That was, to his credit, mostly accurate. I remember lying in my tent that first night, thinking that this was working, that we were going to give Joel what he asked for, that the forest was doing what forests do, which is make human problems feel appropriately small. I was right about all of that. I was wrong about what would fill the space once our problems shrank. The second day we pushed to the high basin. The trail gained 2,000 feet in 4 miles, and Joel slowed considerably after lunch. Nobody mentioned it. Margot walked behind him and matched his pace without making it obvious. I stayed in front to navigate and pick the most gradual switchbacks I could find. We reached the basin at around 4 in the afternoon. It was exactly how I remembered. A shallow alpine bowl ringed by subalpine fir. A small tarn at the center reflecting the sky like a dropped coin, and a strange quality of silence that I've never experienced anywhere else. Not quiet, silence, the kind that feels manufactured, as if the basin were a room with sound-dampening panels. Corrine noticed it first. She stopped walking, tilted her head, and said, "Where are the birds?" She was right. No bird song, no insect noise, no wind in the canopy. The only sound was us. Our boots, our breathing, the click of trekking poles on rock. Elevation, Tatum said. We're above the songbird range. He was wrong. Varied thrush, mountain chickadee, Clark's nutcracker, all of them should have been active at that altitude in October. I knew this. I didn't say it, because I didn't want to introduce anxiety into a trip that was supposed to be about peace. That was my first mistake. Not because the silence was a warning I should have heeded. I didn't yet know it was, but because I chose management over honesty, with people who deserved honesty. I set a precedent with myself that night. I decided I was the person who would decide what the group needed to know. I carried that decision for 3 more days, and it cost us. We set up camp on the north side of the tarn. Joel was exhausted but happy. He sat on a rock with his boots off, soaking his feet in water that must have been barely above freezing, grinning like a kid. Margot took a photo of him. I've seen that photo since. He looks immortal in it. That's not sentiment. He literally looks like a person who isn't dying. The light does something to his face that erases the gauntness, fills in the shadows under his eyes. He looks 25 and invincible. We ate dinner early. The silence persisted, and I think everyone felt it, though only Corinne had named it. Conversations happened in clusters, and then died. People stared at the tarn. Andre kept turning his head toward the tree line, as if he'd heard something at the edge of perception, and was trying to catch it repeating. At around 9 o'clock, just after full dark, Joel said, "Something's watching us." Not as a joke, not as a ghost story gambit. He said it the way you'd say, "I think it's going to rain." Observational. Matter of fact. Margot said, "Joel, don't." "I'm not doing anything," he said. "I'm just telling you what I feel. Something in the trees is watching us. It's been watching since we got here." I looked at the tree line. The fire threw light maybe 20 feet into the firs before the dark ate it completely. Beyond that, nothing. Absolute blackness. "It's the silence," Corrine said. "Your brain fills in a presence when there's no ambient sound. It's a known psychological phenomenon." "Maybe," Joel said. He didn't sound convinced, but he dropped it. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because of what Joel said. I'd been in these woods dozens of times and never felt threatened. But because at around 2 in the morning, I unzipped my tent to urinate and noticed that the silence had changed. It was no longer the absence of sound. It was the suppression of sound. I could feel it on my eardrums. A faint pressure, the way your ears feel in the moment before they pop on a descending airplane. The air felt heavy with the effort of being quiet. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, listening to nothing with an intensity I'd never applied to listening before. And then, and I need to be precise about this because precision matters, I heard a footstep. One. Single. Step. Not an animal step. Not the light crack of a deer hoof or the shuffle of a raccoon. A footstep. Weight distributed the way a human distributes weight when they're trying to walk quietly, and they place one foot and then pause to check if they've been heard. I waited. My breath was a roar in my own ears. Nothing followed. No second step. No retreat. Just the one step and then the pressurized silence again. I went back into my tent. I did not wake anyone. Second mistake. The third morning started strangely. When I got up at dawn, Tatum was already awake, sitting on a rock, facing the tree line, with his camp stove cold beside him and a topographic map spread across his knees. He looked like he'd been up for a while. "I need to ask you something," he said when I approached. "And I need you to be honest. Is there a trail through those trees that isn't on the map?" He pointed at the firs on the western side of the basin, the direction we'd be heading for the ridge traverse. "No," I said. "That section is unmaintained. No trail at all. We'll be route finding on the traverse." "Then what's that?" He handed me a pair of compact binoculars and pointed. I looked where he was indicating, about 200 yards into the tree line, where the firs grew so close together that their trunks formed a kind of palisade. At first I saw nothing. Then my eyes resolved what he'd seen. A gap in the trunks. Not a random gap. A cleared gap. A corridor. Maybe 4 feet wide, running straight back into the forest at a slight uphill angle. The edges were clean. Not broken or storm damaged. Cut. Someone had cut a path through old-growth firs that were 3 feet in diameter, and they'd done it neatly enough that from any distance it simply looked like a natural spacing in the trees. "That wasn't here the last time I came through this basin," I said. "When was the last time?" 11 years ago. So, someone could have cut it since then. Someone could have. But there's no reason to. There's nothing up there. No mining claims, no fire lookout, nothing. Tatum folded his map. "I'm going to walk over and look at it. We need to pack up. The traverse is the hardest day." 15 minutes, he said, and he was already moving. I let him go. I should have gone with him. But Corinne was starting to cook breakfast, and Joel was emerging from his tent, looking pale and needing help with his boots because his fingers were too stiff from the cold. And I made the calculation that group care mattered more than Tatum's curiosity. Tatum was gone for 45 minutes. When he came back, he was walking fast. Not running. Tatum had too much pride to run, but moving with the deliberate speed of someone who wants to be back among other people as quickly as dignity permits. There are structures in there, he said. Everyone stopped. Joel looked up from his oatmeal. What kind of structures? Andre asked. I don't know. Not buildings. Things made of wood. And, I think, sinew, or some kind of cord. They're in the trees, high up. I almost didn't see them because they're the same color as the bark. They're like, he stopped. I don't know what they're like. I've never seen anything like them. How many? I asked. I stopped counting at 9. They go back as far as I could see along the corridor. Margot said, we should leave. He was watching Tatum's face with an expression I can only describe as recognition. Not surprise, not fear. Recognition, as if Tatum had just confirmed something Joel already knew. Joel, I said, what do you think? I think we should go look. Joel. Margot's voice was sharp. What's it going to do to me? He said, I'm already dying. I want to see. 15 minutes, he said, and he was already moving. I let him go. I should have gone with him. But Corinne was starting to cook breakfast, and Joel was emerging from his tent, looking pale and needing help with his boots, because his fingers were too stiff from the cold. And I made the calculation that group care mattered more than Tatum's curiosity. Tatum was gone for 45 minutes. When he came back, he was walking fast. Not running. Tatum had too much pride to run, but moving with the deliberate speed of someone who wants to be back among other people as quickly as dignity permits. There are structures in there, he said. Everyone stopped. Joel looked up from his oatmeal. What kind of structures? Andre asked. I don't know. Not buildings. Things made of wood. And, I think, sinew, or some kind of cord. They're in the trees, high up. I almost didn't see them because they're the same color as the bark. They're like, he stopped. I don't know what they're like. I've never seen anything like them. How many? I asked. I stopped counting at 9. They go back as far as I could see along the corridor. Margot said, we should leave. He was watching Tatum's face with an expression I can only describe as recognition. Not surprise, not fear. Recognition, as if Tatum had just confirmed something Joel already knew. Joel, I said, what do you think? I think we should go look. Joel. Margot's voice was sharp. What's it going to do to me? He said, I'm already dying. I want to see. That statement cracked the group along a fault line I hadn't known existed. On one side, Joel, who had nothing to lose, and Tatum, who was driven by something I was beginning to suspect wasn't curiosity at all, but a kind of compulsion. On the other, Margot, who wanted her brother safe and alive for every remaining hour, and Corinne, who had the look of a person doing rapid risk calculus. Andre stood in the middle waiting for Corinne to decide his position for him. And me, I stood where I always stand, which is at the point where knowledge and responsibility intersect and make each other worse. We stay on the planned route, I said. We traverse the ridge. If the corridor is along the way, we can look at it from a distance without detouring. This was a compromise designed to satisfy no one, and it worked exactly as well as such compromises do. We broke camp at 8:30 and entered the tree line on the western side of the basin, Within 200 yards, the canopy closed above us, and the light dropped to a gray twilight. GPS signal cut in and out. I navigated by compass and the slope angle, keeping us on a contour that should have brought us to the ridge crest within 2 miles. Within 20 minutes, we crossed the corridor. It was unmistakable at ground level. A straight channel cut through the forest, 4 feet wide, extending in both directions farther than I could see. The cuts on the trees were old, years old at least. The exposed wood had weathered to silver, but the floor of the corridor was clean. No deadfall, no new growth, no accumulation of needles. Someone was maintaining it. And now I could see the structures Tatum had described. They hung in the canopy at intervals of maybe 30 feet, suspended between the trunks on either side of the corridor. They were roughly spherical, about the size of a large beach ball, made of interwoven branches and bound with something pale and fibrous. They looked organic and deliberate, like wasp nests built with an architect's eye. "Don't touch anything," I said. We crossed and keep moving. We crossed. Everyone looked up as they passed under the structures. Nobody spoke. On the other side, Kareem grabbed my arm and pulled me close enough to whisper. "Those aren't old," she said. "The cuts on the trees are weathered. They've been here a while." "Not the corridor. The things in the trees. Look at the binding material." She held up her phone, showing a photo she'd taken as she crossed. She zoomed in on one of the spheres. The fibrous binding was pale, almost white, and it had a sheen to it. A wet sheen. "That was made recently," she said. "Days, maybe." "And Darren, that's not plant fiber. I have a biology degree. That's tendon." I stared at the photo. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say it was bark strip or yucca fiber or paracord that had weathered, but I'd been looking at the natural world my entire life, and the thing in that photo had the twisted, drying, wet look of animal connective tissue. "We keep moving," I said. "Faster." For the next hour, we pushed hard through the off-trail section. I kept us on compass, gaining the ridge gradually. The forest was dense and navigation demanded all my attention. Behind me, I could hear the group strung out in a line. Joel's labored breathing, Andre's heavy footfalls, the occasional crack of Tatum breaking a dead branch with his shin. Then Margot said loudly, "Stop." I turned around. She was standing still, one hand raised, head cocked. "Listen," she said. I listened, and I heard it. Footsteps. Not one this time. A continuous, measured cadence, somewhere to our left, roughly paralleling our path, maybe 100 yards away in the trees, walking at our pace. Step, 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 step. The rhythm was perfect, mechanically perfect. No variation in tempo, no stumble, no pause. "That's a person," Andre said. "No, it isn't," Margot said. She was right. I knew it immediately, and I think everyone did. A person walking through dense old-growth forest cannot maintain a metronomic pace. There are roots, rocks, fallen logs. You speed up and slow down. You hesitate. Whatever was walking beside us moved as if the ground were flat and featureless, as if the forest weren't there. We stood frozen for maybe 10 seconds. The footsteps continued. Then they stopped, and the silence came back, that pressurized, effortful silence, and with it the unmistakable sensation of being observed. "Go," I said. "Now. Don't run. Walk fast. Stay together." We moved. The footsteps didn't resume. We reached the ridge crest at noon. The trees thinned. The sky opened up. We could see the second basin below us to the east and the drainage we'd climbed on the west. The sun was out, and the air was cold and moving, and I have never been so grateful for wind and light in my life. Joel sat down heavily on a rock and closed his eyes. He was gray-faced and breathing in shallow sips. Margot knelt beside him and put a hand on his chest. "I'm okay," he said. "Just winded." "We need to talk about what's happening," Corrine said. "Someone's out here," Andre said. "A person. Maybe a hermit. Someone living off-grid. Those structures could be—" "They're bound with animal tendon," Corinne said. "Dozens of them. Uniform in size and construction. That's not a hermit's hobby project." "Okay," Andre said. He didn't have a follow-up. Tatum had been quiet for the entire ridge climb. Now he spoke, and his voice had a quality I hadn't heard from him before. It was subdued, chastened. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I should have said this before the trip." Everyone looked at him. "I've been to the Almeida before. Last year. Solo. I hiked into the North Fork drainage and went off trail into the section we just crossed. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You didn't tell me that. No. Because what happened to me up there, I couldn't explain it. And I thought if I told you, you'd think I was crazy, and Joel wouldn't get his trip." "What happened to you?" Tatum sat down. He pressed his palms together between his knees. "I found the corridor. I followed it for about a mile. The structures were there. Fewer of them, I think, than what we saw today. I took pictures. When I got home, the photos were corrupted. Every single one. My camera was fine. I used it after the trip with no problems. Just those files were destroyed." "That happens with memory cards," I said. "It doesn't mean—" "Let me finish. 2 weeks after I got home, I started finding things outside my apartment. No one spoke. Small things. A bundle of sticks bound with white cord. On my doorstep. A dead bird. A varied thrush on my windowsill, arranged with its wings spread in a specific pattern. I live on the 3rd floor. These things were appearing on my windowsill, and I started hearing the footsteps at night, outside my building. That same rhythm, that perfect mechanical pace, walking back and forth on the sidewalk below my window. I'd look out and no one was there. Why didn't you go to the police?" Margot asked. "And tell them what? That a forest was stalking me? I thought I was losing my mind. I went to a doctor. I got an MRI. I was hoping, this sounds insane, I was hoping they'd find something wrong with my brain because that would explain it. Did they? No. Clean scan. The events continued for about 6 weeks, and then stopped. Cold. One day they were happening and the next day they weren't, and they never came back. I thought it was over. He looked at me, and I saw it in his face. Guilt. Raw, uncomplicated guilt. I came on this trip because I needed to know if it was real. I needed to see the corridor again. I used Joel's trip as an excuse. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't honest. The silence that followed was not the pressurized, unnatural silence of the forest. It was the human silence of people recalibrating their trust in someone. Joel broke it. Tatum, did you lead it to us? I don't know. Here is where I need to tell you about the decision I made on that ridge, because it's the decision everything afterward pivots on. In the stories I'd told myself about who I am, a competent woodsman, a reliable leader, a protector, the right call was obvious. Turn around retrace our route, get out. But our return route went back through the corridor section, and the only alternative was the forward route down through Let's Creek Canyon, which I'd never traveled and which was, according to the topo map, steep, exposed, and at least 12 miles to the trailhead. Going back meant passing through whatever was in those trees again, with full knowledge that something in there was tracking us. Going forward meant unknown terrain, a longer hike, and a terminally ill man who was already at his physical limit. But there was a third factor, and it's the one I'm ashamed of. I was angry. I was angry at Tatum for his deception. I was angry at whatever was in the forest for turning Joel's last good trip into a nightmare. And I was angry at myself for every moment I'd chosen diplomacy over truth. That anger did something dangerous. It made me want to stop managing the situation and start controlling it. We go forward, I said, down Let's Creek. We move fast. We stay on the ridge as long as possible where it's open. And we don't stop until we're below the tree line on the east side. What about... Andre started. If it follows us, we deal with it. We're 6 people. We have knives, a hatchet, bear spray, and a GPS beacon I can trigger for emergency evac if we need it. Darren, we don't even know what it is. Then maybe it's time we found out. That was the anger talking. I know that now. But at the time, it felt like clarity. The ridge traverse was 2 miles of exposed alpine terrain. Wildflowers had gone to seed. The wind was steady. We could see in every direction. And there was nothing to see except rock and sky and the dark carpet of forest below us on both sides. For 2 miles, we were safe, and we knew it. And it made the prospect of descending back into the trees almost physically unbearable. Joel walked slowly but steadily. He stayed close to Margot. At one point, I dropped back to walk beside him. "How are you doing?" He smiled. It was a genuine smile, and it nearly broke me. Something out here wants something from us. That's more interesting than a tumor. That's a hell of a way to look at it. I'm running out of ways to look at things. I might as well pick the interesting ones. The ridge dropped steeply into a forested drainage that the topo map showed as Let's Creek. The trees here were different. More hemlock, more cedar, darker and wetter than the fir stands on the western side. The trail, such as it was, appeared as a faint game path winding between moss-covered boulders. Before we descended, I stopped the group. Rules for the descent. Nobody walks alone. Voice contact at all times if you hear the footsteps. Call it out immediately. If you see anything, structures, cleared ground, anything that looks made, call it out. If something happens that I haven't anticipated, we trigger the beacon and we sit tight until a helicopter comes. And if it gets close? Corinne asked. I pulled the bear spray from my pack. We spray it, we hit it. We make ourselves a problem it doesn't want. You're assuming it can be hurt, Margot said. I'm assuming it has a body. Whatever walks leaves footprints. Whatever has a body can be hurt. I believed that at the time. I'm less certain now. We descended. The first hour was uneventful. The game path was rough but passable. Let's Creek appeared as a trickle and gradually widened. The forest thickened around us, but the silence didn't return. We could hear the creek, hear birds, hear wind. Normal forest sounds. I started to wonder if we'd left it behind on the western slope. If whatever had made the corridor was territorial rather than mobile, bound to a specific section of the watershed. Then Tatum, who was walking second to last in the line, said, I smell it. I stopped. Smell what? It came about 10 seconds later. A smell unlike anything I have a framework for. Not decay. I've smelled decay plenty. Not musk or ammonia or sulfur or any of the baseline bad smells that evolution has taught us to avoid. This was something else. It was thick. It had a physical quality, like breathing through a damp cloth that had been soaked in something bitter. It coated the inside of my mouth. My eyes watered. "Oh God," Corrine said, and pressed her sleeve over her nose. "That's what my apartment smelled like," Tatum said. During the 6 weeks, I'd come home and this smell would be there just for a few minutes, and then it would dissipate. The smell passed. It rolled through us like a wave and continued down the drainage and was gone. "It's below us," Joel said. He was right. The smell had come from downhill, from the direction we were heading. "So it got ahead of us," Andre said. "While we were on the ridge, it went around. The implications of that settled over the group. Whatever this was, it had anticipated our route, traveled miles through dense forest to position itself between us and the trailhead, and was now waiting in the drainage below. This is the moment where I stopped being angry and started being afraid." "Options," Corrine said. She was the calmest person present, and I was grateful for her. "We can go back up to the ridge and trigger the beacon from there. Open ground, good GPS signal. Helicopter can reach us. That's 6 miles back uphill," I said. "Joel can't do that today." "I can," Joel started. "You can't," Margot said gently. "Your heart rate's been over 140 all day." "I've been watching." "We continue down," I said. "But we modify. We leave the drainage. We contour south along the slope and hit the next drainage over. That should be Holt Creek, based on the map. It adds maybe 3 miles, but it keeps us off the path it's expecting." "You're trying to outsmart something that just outmaneuvered us across a mountain," Margot said. "Yes. Do you have a better idea?" She didn't. Nobody did. We left the drainage and began contouring south. Contouring through pathless, steep forest with a dying man is exactly as difficult as it sounds. We moved at perhaps 1 mile per hour, maybe less. Joel fell twice. The second time, he stayed down for several minutes, breathing in quick, shallow gasps, and Tatum and I had to lift him to his feet. "Leave me," Joel said. "Shut up," Margot said. "I mean it. Leave me the beacon. I'll trigger it. They'll come for me. You 5 move faster without me." "Nobody is leaving anybody," I said. I said it with authority I didn't feel, because the truth was that the calculation Joel was proposing made tactical sense. And the only thing stopping me from agreeing was a moral conviction that I could feel bending under the weight of circumstance. We kept moving. The afternoon light was going gold and long. We had maybe 2 hours until dark. At 4:15, Andre, who was bringing up the rear, said, "Something just crossed behind us." Everyone stopped. "Where?" I said. "Uphill, 30 yards. It went between those 2 cedars." He pointed. I looked. The 2 cedars he indicated were massive, 6 feet in diameter with a gap between them of about 10 feet. Beyond them, the slope continued upward into shadow. What did it look like? It was cycling between expressions, confusion, concentration, something approaching disgust, as if his brain were trying to process an image it didn't have a category for. "Tall," he said. "Very tall. It moved wrong." "Wrong how?" It. He shook his head. It was like watching a person walk. But the proportions were off. The legs were too long, and it didn't move continuously. It was in one spot, and then it was in the next spot. Like dropped frames. Like video with frames cut out. A bear standing up, Tatum said. He didn't sound like he believed it. It wasn't a bear, Andre said. He was trembling. Corinne took his arm. We need to keep moving, I said. Darren. Joel's voice was quiet. Come here. I went to him. He was sitting on a fallen log, gray-faced, and he reached up and grabbed the front of my jacket and pulled me close with more strength than a dying man should have had. Stop running, he whispered. Listen to me. Stop running. It doesn't want to chase. It's hurting us. I felt ice down my spine. How do you know that? Because every time we change direction, it repositions. It was below us in the drainage. So we went south. Now it's behind us, pushing us south. Where does south go? My hands were shaking, so it took me a moment to orient it. South of our current position, the slope steepened considerably. And at the bottom of the steepening slope was a feature I hadn't paid attention to before. A narrow side canyon, almost a ravine. With contour lines so close together, they merged into a solid brown band. A dead end. Cliffs on 3 sides. It's pushing us into a box canyon, I said. Joel nodded. Then we go north, Margot said. North goes back toward the corridor, Corinne said. Joel looked at me. His eyes were bright and calm, and utterly unafraid, and I understood suddenly that his lack of fear wasn't philosophical. It was practical. He had already accepted an ending. The only question for him was what that ending would buy. Darren, he said, give me the bear spray. Give me the hatchet. Give me the beacon, and go north. Joel, no. It wants something. Maybe it wants one of us. Maybe it wants whoever came back. Maybe it followed Tatum, and now it wants to close a loop. I don't know, but I can slow it down. I can make noise, trigger the beacon, and make myself the most interesting thing in this forest, while the rest of you move. You don't even know if... And I know that dying on a hospital bed in February is worth less than dying here, now doing something that matters. Give me the hatchet, Darren. I looked at Margot. She was crying. Not the desperate, bargaining kind of crying. The still kind. The kind that means someone has already grieved and is now watching the last shape of something they love come into focus. He's right, she said. We argued for 10 minutes. Corinne argued hardest against it, but Joel was immovable, and the fading light was making the argument academic. Whatever was in the forest would have advantages in the dark that we wouldn't. Here is what we did. Joel kept the hatchet, the bear spray, 1 headlamp, the emergency beacon, and his share of the food. He would stay on the slope where he was, trigger the beacon at full dark, and make himself visible and audible. If search and rescue came, and with a beacon activation in good weather, response time was typically 2 to 4 hours. He'd be extracted by helicopter. If the thing in the forest came first, he'd fight. The rest of us would go north, northeast, following the contour back toward the upper Letts Creek drainage, and then descending to the trailhead on the original planned route. 5 people moving fast through the dark. 12 miles, maybe 14. We'd be out by midnight if we didn't stop. I'm going to tell you that I didn't want to leave him. That's true. But I'm also going to tell you that a part of me, a part I've spent every day since trying to understand, felt relief. And the relief wasn't just about having a plan. It was about the unbearable weight of protecting a dying man being lifted from my shoulders. I hated that feeling then. I hate it now. But I will not pretend it wasn't there, because I've learned that the only thing worse than feeling something monstrous is lying about it. Joel hugged Margot for a long time. He whispered something to her that I didn't hear, and she has never shared. He shook Tatum's hand and said, "Don't feel guilty. You didn't cause this. You just found it first." He nodded at Corinne and Andre. Then he grabbed my arm. "Go fast," he said. "Don't come back for me. Whatever happens, don't come back." We left him on the slope with the light turning amber through the canopy, sitting on the fallen log with the hatchet across his knees. And I am not going to describe what that looked like, because some images are private, and this one belongs to the 5 of us who walked away. We moved fast. Margot set the pace, and it was punishing. She walked like she was trying to outrun her own decision, and maybe she was. Tatum stayed close behind her. I navigated. Corinne and Andre brought up the rear. The first 30 minutes were quiet, normal forest sounds, the creek growing louder as we regained the Letts Creek drainage. I was starting to think Joel's gambit had worked, that whatever was tracking us had stayed with the most visible target, the one making noise and light, and that we were slipping away. Then Corinne said, "I see lights." I looked where she was pointing. Downhill, through the trees, maybe 300 yards below us. Lights. Small, pale, faintly bluish. Not flashlights. Wrong color. Wrong quality. These were diffuse, almost bioluminescent, and they were stationary. 8 or 9 of them, arranged in a rough semicircle. "Are those the structures?" Tatum whispered. "Are they glowing?" "We're miles from the corridor," I said. "Are we?" I checked the compass. We were heading north-northeast, as planned. The corridor had been to the west. There was no reason for it to be here, unless it wasn't a single corridor. Unless it was a network. "Go around," Margot said. "Give them a wide berth." For 10 minutes, we moved in near total darkness, headlamps off to avoid drawing attention, navigating by the sound of the creek to our left and the feel of the slope under our feet. My night vision was as good as it was going to get, and I could see perhaps 10 feet in any direction. And then the footsteps started again. This time they were close, very close. Not 100 yards away, but right beside us. 15, 20 feet to our right. Keeping pace. That same mechanical rhythm. Step, step, step. And now I could hear something I hadn't heard before. Breathing. Or something like breathing. A deep, slow, cycling sound, like air being drawn through a very large space. An almost tidal sound, inhalation lasting 4 or 5 seconds. Exhalation lasting the same. The breathing of something with lungs bigger than mine. Margot turned her headlamp on. "Don't," I started. The beam hit the trees. For 1/2 second. 1 frame. 1 frozen instant. The light caught something between 2 hemlock trunks. I saw it. I need to describe what I saw, and I need you to understand that I am describing it as carefully and honestly as I can, with no embellishment. It was tall, 8 feet, perhaps more, and narrow, like a person who had been stretched vertically. Its proportions were approximately human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but the ratios were wrong. The limbs were too long by about 40%, giving it the look of a figure in a funhouse mirror. It was dark, not clothed in darkness, but composed of darkness, as if its surface absorbed light rather than reflecting it. I could see it only because the trees behind it were slightly lighter than it was. Its face, if it was a face, was turned toward us. I could not make out features. There was an area where a face should have been that was slightly concave, slightly recessed, like a shallow bowl. And in that concavity, there was movement, something shifting, something arranging itself. Margot screamed and the light swung away, and when it came back, the space between the trunks was empty. The footsteps had stopped. The breathing had stopped. The pressurized silence was total. "Run," I said. "Run." I will not pretend it was coordinated or strategic. We ran down the slope toward the creek, crashing through brush, falling, heading up, falling again. Andre went down hard on a rock and gashed his shin and got up without stopping. Margot lost her footing on a wet log, and Tatum caught her arm. I ran with the compass in one hand, trying to keep us on a bearing, failing, abandoning the compass, and just running downhill, because downhill meant out. We hit the creek at a full sprint and crossed it without slowing, soaking ourselves to the waist in knee-deep water, so cold it felt electric. On the other side, the forest was different. Younger trees, more space between trunks, undergrowth thinning to fern and salal. Second growth, logging history, human presence. We were getting closer to the edge of the wilderness. We ran for another 20 minutes before Corinne collapsed. She went down on her knees and then onto her side and couldn't get up. Andre knelt beside her. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't breathe." I looked behind us, uphill, into the dark. Nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. No lights. "Where are we?" Margot asked. I pulled out the map and my headlamp. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the contour lines. But the creek we'd crossed, the young timber, the elevation, I could place us roughly. We were in the lower Letts Creek drainage. The trailhead was approximately 4 miles away. 4 miles. On a trail, in daylight, that's 90 minutes. In the dark, off-trail, with an injured man and an exhausted woman, it might be 3 hours or more. "Can you walk?" I asked Corinne. "Give me 5 minutes." During those 5 minutes, I sat in the dark and listened to the forest, and heard nothing but the creek and the wind and the ordinary rustling of a normal living ecosystem. Whatever had been up there on the slope had not followed us down. Or it had, and it was being quiet about it. At the end of 5 minutes, something happened that I cannot explain. Joel's voice came through the trees. Not distant, not echoed, close, as if he were standing 30 feet away in the dark, just beyond the range of my headlamp. His voice, unmistakable, speaking clearly and calmly. "Darren, it's okay. Come back." Every hair on my body stood up. "Darren, I found something. It's not what we thought. Come back and see." Margot made a sound. A low animal moan. She pressed both hands over her ears. "That's not him," Tatum said. His voice was barely a whisper. "That is not him. Darren, Margot, it's Joel. I triggered the beacon, but nobody came. I walked down to find you. I'm right here." It was his voice, his exact voice, his cadence, his pitch, his habit of front-loading sentences with names. If I had heard that voice on a phone call, I would not have questioned it for a second. But Joel was 6 miles behind us on a slope with a hatchet and a beacon, and even a healthy man couldn't have covered that distance in the time since we'd separated. Keep moving, I said. Now. Don't respond. Don't look. Walk. We walked. Joel's voice followed us for perhaps a quarter-mile, growing neither louder nor quieter, maintaining the same distance, saying variations of the same thing. Come back. It's okay. I found something. You need to see. Then it said something different. Margot, I'm scared. Please don't leave me here. Margot stopped walking. She turned around. Margot. I grabbed her shoulder. That's not your brother. She looked at me. Her face was destroyed. Whatever was speaking with Joel's voice had found the one sentence, the precise configuration of words that could stop her. Because Joel had never, in the entire time I'd known him, admitted to being scared of anything. And the idea that he was scared now, alone in the dark, calling for his sister, that was the thing she couldn't walk away from. It knows, she whispered. It knows exactly what to say. Yes. And that's how you know it's not him. Joel wouldn't say that. Not to manipulate you into coming back. He told us not to come back. She stared into the dark behind us for a long, horrible moment. Then she turned and kept walking. The voice stopped. We reached a logging road at 11:40 p.m. It was unmistakable. A wide, graded gravel surface cutting through the forest, with tire tracks and a drainage ditch and a metal post with a faded Forest Service route number. Human infrastructure. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen. We followed the road downhill. Within a mile, we had cell signal. I called 911 and reported a medical emergency and a missing person. Joel Marsh, approximate coordinates, beacon activated, likely immobile on a mountain slope. The dispatcher asked if we were in danger. I said I didn't know. A county sheriff's deputy met us at the trailhead at 1:15 a.m. He took one look at us, soaked, bloody, shaking, 5 people who'd left with 6, and called for additional units. We were transported to a ranger station. A paramedic cleaned Andre's leg. Someone gave us coffee and blankets. I gave a statement. I told the deputy about Joel's location, the beacon, his medical condition. I described the route we'd taken. I did not, in that first statement, say anything about what we'd seen in the forest. I told him Joel had become too ill to continue and had stayed behind with emergency equipment while we went for help. Here is why I lied. Because telling the truth would have introduced complexity that delayed Joel's rescue. If I'd described a tall, impossible figure in the trees and a forest that mimicked human voices, the response would have shifted from rescue a sick man on a mountainside to evaluate the mental state of the people making the report. Joel needed a helicopter, not a psychiatric evaluation of his friends. The helicopter launched at 2 a.m. Search and rescue reached Joel's approximate coordinates at 2:40. They found the beacon. It had been activated at 7:18 p.m., exactly when Joel said he'd trigger it. Full dark. It was sitting upright on the fallen log where we'd left him. Still transmitting. The hatchet was next to it. The bear spray was next to it, unused, safety clip still in place. Joel was gone. Search and rescue spent 3 days in the Almeida watershed, looking for Joel Marsh. They brought dogs. They brought a drone with thermal imaging. They brought 27 volunteers and 4 professional trackers. They did not find Joel. What they did find, on the second day, was a corridor. A straight, cleared path cut through old-growth trees on the western slope, running roughly north-south for what the search commander estimated was at least 2 miles. The corridor was empty. No structures, no spheres in the canopy. Just the cut path, the weathered stumps, and a clean forest floor. I was not present for the search. I was at Margot's house in Portland, sitting with her while she made phone calls to family and stared at her phone waiting for news. Corinne and Andre had driven home. Tatum had disappeared, left the ranger station before anyone realized he was gone, and didn't answer his phone for 3 days. When the search was called off, a detective from the county sheriff's office came to Portland and interviewed each of us separately. I told the truth this time. All of it. The structures, the footsteps, the figure, the voice. The detective listened without expression, took notes, and asked if Joel had been experiencing hallucinations as a symptom of his glioblastoma. I said not that I knew of. He asked if any of us had been using recreational drugs on the trip. I said no. The detective told me, as he left, that Joel's case would remain open as a missing person. He did not say he believed me. He did not say he didn't. Joel's body has never been found. It's been almost 6 months. I'm going to tell you what has happened since, and then I'm going to tell you why I'm telling you all of this now. Corinne and Andre broke up 2 months after the trip. Corinne told me it wasn't related. I don't believe her, but it's not my business. Margot has not returned to the Almeida. She runs a memorial for Joel, an annual scholarship in his name for outdoor education. She doesn't talk about what happened in the forest. When I tried to bring it up at Christmas, she told me very clearly that she had made peace with not knowing what happened to her brother and that my need for answers was my problem, not hers. Tatum contacted me once, 3 weeks after the trip, by email. He wrote 4 sentences. I went back. The corridor is gone. The structures are gone. Don't contact me again. I haven't. As for me, I'm the one who can't let go, and I know that, and I know what it says about me. I've gone back to the Almeida twice, both times in daylight, both times staying on maintained trails, both times carrying a beacon and a satellite phone. Both times, the forest was exactly what a forest should be: alive, noisy, indifferent. Birds, insects, wind. Nothing watched me. Nothing followed. The corridor, if it was ever where I thought it was, showed no trace. But here's what I keep coming back to. Joel said, on the ridge, that the thing in the forest was hurting us. He was right. It repositioned to drive us south, toward a dead-end canyon. It anticipated our movements. It had strategy. And then Joel offered himself. He said, "Take me. Let them go." And it did. Which means it understood the offer. It heard a dying man say, "I will stay." And it accepted the transaction. Which means it thinks, it reasons, it negotiates. Which means when it spoke with Joel's voice in the dark and said, "Come back," I found something. It's not what we thought. Maybe it wasn't lying. Maybe Joel did find something. Maybe, in the hours between when we left him and when search and rescue arrived to find an empty log, something happened that wasn't capture or death. Maybe it was exchange. Maybe it was communication. I don't believe this. I want to believe it because it means Joel's ending wasn't horror. But I don't believe it because the thing that spoke with his voice used his fear against his sister, and that is not the behavior of something that means well. Here is why I'm telling this story now. 3 days ago, I received a package. No return address. Postmarked from a town I've never heard of in rural Washington. Inside was a small bundle of sticks bound with white cord, and a photograph is of the high basin where we camped on night 2. The tarn, the ring of subalpine fir. It was taken recently. The snow pattern on the surrounding peaks matches this spring's snowpack. In the foreground of the photo, sitting on a rock with his boots off and his feet in the water, is a figure. The figure is the right size and shape to be Joel. The face is not visible. The angle is wrong, or the light is wrong, or something about the figure makes the face impossible to resolve. I've stared at it for hours. The face shifts. It won't settle. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting that I can tell you with absolute certainty is Joel's handwriting. I've seen it on birthday cards and gear lists, and 100 scribbled notes. Our 3 words? Still here. Come. I haven't shown this to Margot. I'm not going to. But I need you to understand. I'm not going back. Not because I'm afraid, though I am. I'm afraid in a way that has reshaped the architecture of my sleep and my ability to be in a room with the lights off. I'm not going back because Joel told me not to. On that slope, with the hatchet across his knees, the last thing he said to me was, "Whatever happens, don't come back." And I have decided. It is a decision. I make it every day, sometimes several times a day, that Joel's last words as himself outweigh whatever is written on the back of that photograph. That whatever sent that package, whether it is Joel or something wearing Joel, or something that consumed Joel and inherited his handwriting along with everything else, it does not get to override the choice he made on that mountain. He chose to stay so we could leave. I am going to honor that by staying gone. But I am also going to honor it by telling this story. Because if the corridor is gone, and the structures are gone, and the forest has reset itself to look like nothing happened, then the only evidence that Joel Marsh made the bravest decision I've ever witnessed is the memory of the people who were there. So this is his memorial. Not the scholarship. Not the search report. This. A man I loved sat on a log in a darkening forest and told the rest of us to run. And we ran. And he stayed. And whatever he found there, he's still finding it. I check my doorstep every morning. So far, just the one package. So far,